Thank you for coming. My name is Eric Cohn. I'm the chapter leader of the chapter of America's Future Foundation here in Chicago. Yeah. Thank you. Clearly my reputation has not preceded me because you're applauding. Although I appreciate the flattery. It's very sweet. We're an organization dedicated to helping to develop the next generation of classical liberal leaders here in Chicago. We're really excited to have you all here. We're really excited for our guests tonight. A couple of programming notes before we get started. I can tell you the two tentative events that we're working on that we've had people confirm to us, but we're working on dates and logistics to make sure that we can make it all happen. That our next two events, we'll have one in October. We're looking to have Tim Carney from the Washington Examiner, does a lot of work covering crony capitalism. He also has a new book coming out, the title of which I forget, but if you're interested, you can go to the American Enterprise Institute's website where he is also a fellow, and you can find out about the conference that they are having here in Chicago in October. If you want to know more about that event, you can come talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to give you information about that and how you can sign up. It's a really interesting program. In addition to Tim Carney, you will also have Arthur Brooks, who is going to be leaving the American Enterprise Institute very soon to join the faculty at Harvard University, which is a pretty great appointment for him, for a really great leader. I was very excited to have that for him. Jonah Goldberg will be talking about his book, Suicide of the West, so I'm happy to pass along information on that. And then we're working with our good friends at the National Review Institute on an event in November with Raihan Salam, who is a contributor there at National Review. Interesting guy, so he has a book coming out on immigration. He's more of an immigration restrictionist. So it would be, I think, an interesting topic.
And a son of immigrants himself.
And a son of immigrants himself. So it should be a very interesting conversation. We're really looking forward to nailing down those details and hosting him in November. So since I can't give you exact information and dates, that's why you should be on our email list. So if you're not on our email list now, go talk to the gentleman waving his hand in the blue shirt there, Jeff Halm. You can sign up for our email list. If you signed up through Eventbrite this evening, you're on our email list now, so you'll get our information going forward. Really excited to have you here and excited for these events that we should have coming up. One other note, our bartender Susie in the back is helping to take care of us this evening, so please feel free to tip liberally. It's recommended. So as we get underway, I want to introduce our guest this evening, Mark Janus, a name you may have heard in the last couple of months. Mark Janus is a senior fellow at the Liberty Justice Center and the Illinois Policy Institute, where he serves as an advocate and spokesperson for workers' rights. Mark spent the last 11 years of his career as a child support specialist for the Illinois state government, ensuring the children get all the resources to which they are entitled. It was during that time that Mark courageously took on one of the most powerful political forces in the country, public employee unions. Mark fought for his First Amendment rights and the rights of more than 5 million other government workers, all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court with his case Janus versus AFSCME. Mark's bravery resulted in the single greatest victory for First Amendment rights in a generation. Over the years, Mark had a career in both the private sector and in government. In the 80s, he held a government job, then left for the private company, returned to public service in 2007. That's when he learned that the Illinois politicians had granted AFSCME, the most powerful government union in Illinois, the power to exclusively represent more than 90% of the state workers in Illinois. This type of injustice went on for decades all across the country and affected millions of public workers. That is, until Mark stood up and fought to stop it all the way to the Supreme Court. So we're very thrilled to welcome for a conversation this evening, Mark Janus. So Mark, I'm going to do the version of what authors like when they have a book out, which is just tell me what your book's about. Well, tell me about yourself and how you became a plaintiff in such a significant case before the Supreme Court.
Well, I was born and raised in Springfield. Springfield, by the way, is our state capital. I'd like to make that emphasis. Basically, went to school, studied hard, worked a lot of different jobs growing up, and then went to work for my father for a number of years, and then I went into the work for the state of Illinois at DECA, which is the old Department of Commerce and Community Affairs, in some economic development area. Left them, went into private sector business again, and then in 2007 came back and started working for the state of Illinois again as a child support specialist. During all those years, I got involved in scouting as a kid, and from Cub Scouts all the way up through scouting and attained the rank of Eagle. And then my son got involved in scouting, so naturally I was involved, and I'm still involved to this day. In fact, last Thursday night, I was conducting interviews for 2 Eagle Scout candidates in our council. So I still stay involved, and I still stay, as active as I possibly can in the scouting area, because I think it builds good character, and it gives a lot of young men and now young women a lot of self-reliance and understanding. Did I answer your question?
As I almost dropped my microphone. Yes, so you're working for the state of Illinois. When you came back to work for the state of Illinois, were you always a fair share payer? Were you a member of the union at one point in time? Tell us about the start there.
When I was hired by the state of Illinois, I went through the usual HR process, and nothing was said about a union. I never signed a pledge card. But yet when I got my first paycheck, there was a line item deduction called union dues. And I thought that very odd because I had never signed up to be a member of the union. So I asked around, talked to the peers in my area, and they said, oh yeah, everybody has to pay whether you're a member or not in order to keep your job. And that just didn't sit right with me because nobody asked me. They just assumed, or they just started deducting the money out. But I thought, okay, this is what I've got to do to keep the job. But as time went on, and as the years went by, and I kept paying thousands of dollars to the union, and I kept seeing what the union was doing, especially in the most recent round of contract negotiations, which, by the way, are still not settled. It's still out there on the fringe, if you will. And there were so many points that the AFSCME union made that I just did not agree with. I don't think we have to do a show of hands that everybody knows that the budget situation in the state of Illinois with the pensions and everything else, and it also filters down to the municipal level. The state's broke. We're in a pretty bad situation. And yet here was AFSCME asking for $3 billion, that's with a B, additional wages and benefits. And what immediately came to mind was a Rick Standis editorial cartoon in the Tribune several years ago, where you see this derelict battleship in the bottom of the ocean. It's all rusted hulk, and it's got holes in it. And the little balloon on the ship says that this is the state of Illinois. It's the USS Illinois. And here's this little voice coming out of the battleship that says, "Captain, the crew has decided to strike." And I thought, well, that's appropriate. What are we going to get? Blood out of a turnip here? I mean, and that's what really kind of set me off, and why I found Liberty Justice Center. I met, Pat Hughes and Dana Reichert. We had some conversations, and I decided to, go forward with a case. And in the original filing of the case, there were 3 of us, and 2 of the people dropped out. One because he lost standing, and the other person just decided they didn't want to pursue it. And that left myself as the lone plaintiff. And my dad and my scouting background has always taught me that if you're going to start something, you need to finish it. You need to carry it through to fruition. And so that's why, I'm still here and I'm still fighting.
So you're a state of Illinois employee. You bring this case that starts in the lower courts, moves up, eventually the Supreme Court. What was the reaction from the people that you work with, from members of AFSCME, in bringing this case?
Well, quite frankly, I kept a pretty low profile. I really didn't broadcast. I didn't say a whole lot. I just went to work like everybody does. But as in that, the time period that we had the case accepted to be heard, and I was going around the country speaking at a lot of different locations, obviously got in the papers and my name kind of went to the top. And I had a lot of people at work that came to me and covertly, mind you, thanking me for what I was doing, saying that they had hoped that they could do the same thing, but they just didn't know how. And of course, they had families, and they just weren't sure what the outcome was going to be. Now, on the pro-union side, or the full dues-paying members, they pretty much ignored me. I'd say good morning as you walk in the building, and they just treat me like a ghost, like I didn't even exist. So that was fairly benign. But what really surprised me was the amount of people that contacted me via email, letters, and the like, that said, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for standing up for our rights so that we can make our own decisions.
So do you think that there's, would you say that there's a culture that definitely doesn't want individuals to speak for themselves? So you talk about people talking to you covertly. Is it just, do they feel this presence of this powerful political force that exists all around them, and they don't want to buck the system?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I think that's part of it. And of course, the one thing that, as this case developed and became more prominent, I talked to my mother, and I told her what was going on, and she said, oh my God. She said, you know what they did with Jimmy Hoffa? Does anybody here remember Jimmy Hoffa? That was kind of the culture in that regard. But in today, it's not so much, the physical and the like, which, happened 50 plus years ago. Now it's more social media, op-eds, and, Facebook and that sort of thing, where they try to bring you down and say things about you that just plain misinformation, period.
So what was the process like for you? So most people will go through their lives with very little experience with the Supreme Court outside of the impact that the decisions the court hands down has on their lives. What was the experience like of bringing this case forward through the various levels and ultimately ending up before the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well, the thing you have to remember is that the Supreme Court is not anything at all like you see on TV. It's more of a debate between the attorneys and the justices. I don't even get to testify. I'm not even allowed to sit up with my attorney. I'm sitting in the gallery with hundreds of other people that come in and get tickets. And it's a back and forth question answer. The justices want to maybe challenge the attorney on a particular point, or they want to just maybe get a little bit of clarification, because most of this is done with briefs that have been filed, and then of course the justices and their clerks read and go through all of these. So you have to realize that the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. And to walk into that Supreme Court courtroom is quite overwhelming. The grandeur of it, and just the history that's been there, that's occurred, over the last, 100-some years, and the like. And it's hard to describe, quite frankly.
So while you're going through this process, you mentioned a minute ago the kind of history of intimidation that has existed within union organizations over time. Did you experience any of that personally? Was that a factor at all in your work life while this case was going forward?
No, not really. I mean, I think, as I said earlier, the fact that people just ignored me was kind of how they tried to treat it. And then, of course, they did it more through the media, the Facebook and op-eds and letters to the editor and that sort of thing. Yes, I did get some hate mail. I did get some hate emails and the like, and I did get a few phone calls periodically. But for the most part, I think those were just fringe elements that you're going to have in any endeavor that goes along. But at the same time, I'm not naive enough to think that there could be somebody out there or a group that's going to potentially cause some kind of difficulties. So you kind of have to keep an eye open and make sure that, you're safe and your family is safe.
So just for point of clarity, can you sum up the impact of the case? So this case was decided the last term. What does it mean for current government workers? What is the impact on them in their daily lives?
Well, what happened was about 40 years ago, we had a case called Abood, and in order to keep labor peace, they said in that ruling that unions could charge these agency fees, which amount to approximately 80% of what a full union membership is. However, they say that they're only going to use these agency fees for contract negotiations only. Well, what I find interesting is that if they're getting 80% of a full dues-paying member, and then you start looking at the money and how the unions spend it, in the last presidential election, there were 3 public sector unions or government unions that were in the top 10 donors in the political campaigns. Now, you can't tell me that the difference between an 80% and 100% dues-paying person is going to fill that gap, because it turned out to be just millions and millions of dollars. So I found that kind of interesting, just from a pure calculating standpoint. On the other side, take the Chicago public school system right now. If you are a fair share employee or fair share member and the like, you're paying 100%. You're paying the exact same amount that a full-fledged, full union member of the Chicago Teachers Union. And so how can that be if only the fair share goes for contract negotiations? Now, what has happened after the ruling? The ruling states that you have to basically affirmatively consent to being a member of a union, and the decision also said that you have to, in essence, be aware of the fact that you're signing away your First Amendment rights. And that's in the decision. However, with all decisions, you've got, the legal aspect back and forth of what does it really mean, and there's argument and back and forth. Our position at Liberty Justice is that you don't have to pay the fair share. You just don't have to. And in the state of Illinois, there was an executive order that came out the day of the decision, and all fair share stopped. However, in other states around the country, Pennsylvania, New York, California, et cetera, there's a battle going on out there. There's a battle. And there is even some proposals, like in the state of Hawaii, where Hawaii is saying, well, since we can't collect the fair share money from the employees directly, we'll have the state pay the fair share fee to the union. If you're a taxpayer, would you agree with that? I certainly wouldn't. And this is some of the proposals that are out there that are going round and round. I read about 2 bills today in Pennsylvania. One says that you have to affirmatively advise people that they do not have to join the union and they do not have to pay fair share. There's another bill in Pennsylvania, in a proposal, that says every new hire has to have a meeting with the union, and the union gets all your names and all the addresses and emails and everything, so that they basically can then try to contact you and get you to sign. I believe it was New York that is mandating a 30-minute mandatory union meeting as a new hire. Mandatory, 30-minute for the union to come in and, present their case. And, I find it interesting, and then elections, if a candidate, is on a news program, doesn't the other side of the argument get fair trade time, so to speak, to present the opposing view? In a lot of these cases, they don't. The only thing the employees hear is the union side. So where is that fair? And that's why I'm out fighting. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because there is so much information out there, and it's going so much to one-sidedness that it verges on the absurd at times, quite frankly.
So that would certainly seem to speak to the idea of the inherent political nature and the political power of public sector unions, right? So that you almost immediately have, in a lot of these states, legislators moving to pass legislation that favors the unions, that tries to bail them out from the position that they're in, whereas the court said in the opinion you have to give that clear affirmative consent to have money taken away from you and then given to the union. So, talking about the political nature, that's also an important part of the decision, correct? That the court recognized that public sector unions are inherently political, at least in the sense that everything that they do, the negotiating over wages and salaries and benefits, all of this is paid for with taxpayer money. That's the only possible way that the state can pay for it. The way that that is decided is a political mechanism. Therefore, everything that the unions do, therefore, is political. So this attempt to distinguish between, what is representation and what is political activity is basically a distinction without a difference.
Oh, exactly, because as our arguments that we made said, that anything that a public sector or a government union does is political, period. Because, they put money into campaigns to get certain people elected, and those same people then sit across the table to negotiate a contract. In this most recent round of AFSCME negotiations, where they asked for, these increases in wages and benefits, they didn't get their way, so they went out and rallied and had, rallies across the state advocating for a tax increase so that they could then pay their members. And the question that I raise is, as a state employee or a government employee, if you are a member of a union, aren't you also a taxpayer? So are you now advocating to increase your taxes? Because you're going to have an increase in taxes if you get an increase in wages and benefits. It just goes along, one hand into the other. And that's the part that I found, quite frankly, somewhat absurd in so many areas. And I don't think I have to mention the property tax issue with our pensions. Unions have fought pension reform for years. And where are we on pensions right now in the state of Illinois? It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. And there are multiple reasons for it, which, that would take another hour to get into that. But it's the whole package, if you will, of everything that unions have done that has helped exacerbate some of the problems that we have today. Now, don't get me wrong. Unions can be beneficial. And unions do have a purpose. And I have never said, that unions ought to be shut down and go out of business. If you want to voluntarily join a union and pay the dues and become a member, God bless you, go for it. But don't force people like myself and others to pay for something that we're not a part of and we don't want to be a part of. That's the big crux. We're not bashing unions. We're not out there, trying to shut them down. And that's one of the major misinformation areas that unions are propagating out there. And that's totally against what we're doing and what we're doing. What we're doing is trying to get information out to people and just letting them know what their rights are, period. Because I can guarantee you that the union's not going to stand there and say, Eric, you don't have to join our union. You don't have that right. You have the right to not join. They don't say that. They just don't.
So, piggybacking off of that, you're right that they're not making that case clear. One of the things they're also claiming is that this creates a problem for them and a problem of free riders, of people who are going to get the benefits of a union contract without having to pay anything towards the negotiation that goes into all of that. What are your feelings? I mean, so one, I already know something on the background of all of this, that it's actually a situation that the unions fought for. They wanted monopoly representation. So was it always your position that you would have been content negotiating your own salary, benefits, and all of that with the state? Because the argument that is presented is that all these people are going to be kind of left out, and what are they going to do if the union is not going to bargain for them?
Well, I mean, that's the very big point, is the fact that, they asked for that exclusive representation. They got it passed in legislation years and years ago. When I was a member of an employee of the state back in the 80s, I wasn't covered by a union contract, and I didn't have to pay the fair share. But when I came back in 2007, I did. So in that intervening time, the unions asked for and received that legislation that said that they are the exclusive collective bargaining agent for all of these people. Now, fast forward to current, and they're calling people like myself and others as free riders. Well, I want to turn that against them and say, what about all the free money that I gave you as an agency payer for all those years, and what did you really do for me? You didn't listen to what I said. You advocated for areas that I didn't want, and along with lots and lots of other people. And of course, their argument is, well, we got you wage increases, we got you health benefits, and so on and so on. And yes, they did. I will accept that part of it. But there were so many other things that they support, such as the soda tax in Cook County. They were big supporters of that 1-cent soda tax. Okay? Well, why are they supporting a soda tax? Why? Well, doggone it, because if they didn't get the soda tax, a lot of their members were going to get laid off. And so they were advocating for it to keep their membership high. Well, let's face it, folks, there's only so much money in the budget in government, okay? The state of Illinois and other areas can't print money like the federal government does. And so therefore, you just have to be practical about this. And I go back to my argument of the battleship, where you got this derelict battleship at the bottom of the ocean, and they're going to say they're going to go on strike. Well, what good is that going to do? It's kind of an oxymoron in some respects.
What you mentioned just a few minutes ago about, well, my question is this. Do you think this has the potential to make unions better, in the sense that it can make them more accountable to their membership? In a situation where you are going to continue to draw money from people, no matter what they think, what they want, what they believe, be that at an 80% clip like you had with AFSCME, or at a 100% clip like you have with the Chicago Teachers Union. As I always told people, like a friend of mine wrote a piece during the Chicago Teachers Union strike a number of years ago, and we had a mutual friend who actually was in the press office for the Chicago Teachers Union and reached out and corrected my friend in this piece, where he had said that you have no choice but to join the union. And he said, no, that's not true. You can be a fair share payer. And he's like, oh, okay. And my friend actually had no idea that that was the situation. And he asked, like, okay, so how much does a fair share payer pay? I forget the exact amount. He's like, okay, well, what percent would that be of the actual union dues? It's 100%. It's like, so let me get this straight. You can either pay into the union, be a full member of the union, and be able to vote in union elections, have a voice through all of that, or pay 100% and have no voice in the system whatsoever. Now that people have to give affirmative consent for this, now that people have to choose to opt in, not opt out and still pay money as under the previous regime, do you think this could make unions more accountable to their members and make unions better in the long run?
Oh, absolutely. See, one of my thoughts, during this whole process is, when you go out to buy a dishwasher, a car, or any other product out on the market, don't you voluntarily spend your money for that product, because you feel you're going to get value from it. And if unions are providing so much value, why don't people voluntarily become members? Why do they have to charge these agency fees? Why do they have to force people like myself to be a member? And this goes back to the free rider argument. Well, you're going to have all these people that are going to free ride on the union. But remember, they asked for that. They went to the legislature and asked for it. They wanted that exclusive representation. Well, now that the shoe is on the other foot, so to speak, now all of a sudden they're calling us free riders. but they started it. And they've been taking my money and other people's money for years and years and years. They've been free riding on us. So, you know, I find it almost ridiculous, the argument.
So let's come to the present day. Janus v. AFSCME is decided. We've gone over what the impact is on government workers, what their rights are now. You are no longer a child support specialist with the state of Illinois. Tell us what you're doing now.
Well, currently I'm working with Liberty Justice Center, Pat Hughes and Diana Reichert. And that is because once the decision came down, and I went back to work, and the news articles started coming out, and we started getting emails and letters and other correspondence, we found that the misinformation that the unions were propagating out there was just unbelievable. And we have a website called standwithworkers.org. And we were getting emails from people saying, I want to get out of the union, but they won't let me. Or I asked to get out, and they said, no, you have to wait till the next contract. Or, I'm sorry, we're only going to let you out in a certain window, but they can't tell you when the window is. You know, or they'll say, okay, you have to, you can only opt out within 5 days around your anniversary date. What's my anniversary date? Well, we'll get back to you on that. So, I mean, the unions are doing everything they can to kick the can down the road, so to speak, in order to avoid the fact, you know, that people do want out, and there are people out there that feel that the union is not listening to what they're saying. And if my opinion is that if the union leadership had listened to the constituency, their membership, my case would have never come forward. I would have never filed it. So they kind of made their own bed, if you will, that they now have to sleep in.
So in this work that you're doing, what do you think the road ahead looks like? So what's the, try to project out, you know, a few years, 10 years from now, what kind of work do you think needs to be done in the interim there? And what do you think the future of, you know, labor policy with regard to the way that the dynamics exist between government workers and their unions, between government unions and state government and the taxpayers that fund them? What do you see in the future, and, you know, what are you working towards within that time frame?
Well, I think it's still a little early to really say what is going to happen. I think we're still in what I would call a shakeout period of, you know, everything's, the dust is not settled, and we're still finding our way through a lot of this decision and how it's going to be determined legally. I also think that unions are going to have to change their game book, and I think they're going to have to be more responsive to their members. Fancy that. You know, you had the president of the teachers union on the front steps of the Supreme Court after the oral arguments, Randy Weingarten, saying, well, I guess if we lose, we'll have to be a better communicator with our members. Fancy that. Why wouldn't you already?
Novel idea.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you already be a good communicator with your membership? Okay. And the fact that, you know, whether, you know, unions get stronger or whether they get weaker, you know, I think it's just a matter of time. But I think the complacency part that they have gotten by with for the last 10 years plus, I think they're just going to have to change their game, period.
We'd like to take some questions from our audience. Before we get started, I will give my usual proviso that you can remember back to English class, questions end in these funny little shapes that are question marks. So try to keep the questions as succinct as possible, and preferably not a speech that ends with the question, do you agree with me? I will already tell you, I don't know what you said, but I don't. So I'll let Mark speak for whatever is there. So for the benefit of our friends from CAN TV who are here recording our event this evening, since I don't want to run around with a corded microphone and trip somebody, or more likely trip myself, we don't need that played over and over. I don't want a GIF made out of that. Let's just say that. Jeff Holm is wrong as usual. And we'll debate the pronunciation of GIF later over drinks. Oh boy. Wow. I would just ask that you stand up and use your outdoor voice for asking the question, so everybody can hear. So any questions that we have in the audience? It's not going to be you, Jeff. You're going to have to wait. Jason in the back.
Hi, I'm Jason. I've kind of followed the case on the side. There are many, many, many ridiculous arguments I felt they made, but just to kind of play the devil's advocate, what do you think was the strongest argument that the defendants had?
On the defense side?
Yes.
I'm not sure they really made a strong argument, period. I mean, I'm not an attorney, so I can't really speak to the legal side of it, but I think it's pretty obvious that we made a stronger case. The fact that the First Amendment, which is the rights of free speech and association, was right on. And I think you have to remember, which a lot of people are forgetting today, is that our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, is a contract with this country. It's not a suggestion. I think we have too many people out there that think this document, or the document as a whole package, is a suggestion. It's not. It's a contract.
Hi, I'm Mike. Regarding the free rider and exclusivities issue, I thought that was actually their strongest argument. Would you be okay with a system where union members get paid more or get more benefits or maybe fewer or whatever, a different pay package than non-union members, or you have multiple unions that all get different pay packages because they're all negotiating on behalf of their members as opposed to everyone, because now they can't include everyone?
I think that's a good question, but I think it's too early to say how this is all going to come out. Because currently under the state of Illinois, under the State Labor Relations Act, they have to negotiate for everybody. So whether they will change that legislation so that the members only are negotiated by the union, that has yet to be worked out. So it's hard to say what'll happen and where it'll go.
Support that?
Would I support that?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of address the balance issues that the dissent raised in there.
Well, like I said before, I think it's a little too early to say how that's going to come out and whether, one group should get paid more than another. For example, you've got an MBA, I've got a Bachelor of Science degree, okay? I've got an MBA too, by the way. But, so I may go in and I can, negotiate with Eric and get a better deal than what you can with your union. Is it, you're going to say the reverse on that?
No, you're right.
Same thing.
So I have a 12-word statement and then an 8-word question. Is that allowed? Okay.
I'll indulge you.
I'm a property taxpayer. I have public sector unions because we're negotiating with ourselves. Nobody's representing me at the table. So with that in mind, you talked about pensions briefly. Why can't we move towards IRAs and 401ks on new employees and start a phase out? So is this something the Liberty Justice Center might be working towards?
Well, yeah, we're working in that regard, and we're trying to get to that part of it. But I think one of the reasons that you have a lot of people that don't like the 401k part of it is the fact that they don't believe that it's portable. You can take a 401k and you can move from business to business to business. You may have 3 different employers and it's portable and you can take it, to those 3 different areas and the like, depending on how it's set up and so on and so forth. However, with the state of Illinois and its, pension program, that's not portable. In other words, if you leave the state, it stays there completely until you either draw it out completely 100%, and then you're totally done and gone, or, you just leave it there, and then at the time that you want to be able to draw on it, you can. And I'm not an expert in that area, so I really don't know.
I just don't want the recall deferred wages. They're promising money that's not there, and I want to do away with pensions altogether moving forward.
Yeah,
That's
there's a lot of corporations across the country that have done that. They've gone away from the defined benefit, and they've gone to 401ks and other types of retirement, types of programs. And I think it's just a matter of time where I think we need to do that. But how that comes about and the mechanism for it, that's up to the legislature, and greater minds than I have.
Mark, let me ask you this. I think there's a growing sense amongst younger people that with regard to Social Security, they're doubtful that that is a program that is going to be there when they actually get to the age where they would start collecting Social Security. If the answer to this is I don't know, that's fine. Is there a sense amongst employees of the state government that they think, they look at Illinois' unfunded pension liability, they look at the political chaos that has dominated the state for, it's been pronounced in the last number of years, but it really has been going on for many more years than that, if not decades. Do you think people look at that and think, it's like, yeah, I've been promised this really good pension, but boy, do I doubt that the money is actually going to be able to be there to pay me in my retirement?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I don't know. I know that there are some people that that feel that they will never get any money out of the pension, and the fact that it it may go the way of Detroit, where it filed for bankruptcy, and that pension, I think people got, I don't know what the
everyone took a
figure was,
haircut.
but it was 20 cents on the dollar or whatever it was, and that is a potential possibility. The other thing that you have to look at, like with Social Security and others, is that you can't rely and put your eggs all in one basket. Anybody will tell you that. So to say that you're going to totally retire on a state of Illinois pension or Social Security, I think is just wrong. You need to diversify, and any good competent financial advisor will tell you that.
So given all the loopholes that we're describing, the state's effectively trying to dodge the ruling or the effects of the decision, do you think that there will be further legal action that's necessary before this issue actually gets put to bed?
Oh, absolutely. Liberty Justice is already filing cases across the country, and we're signing up people currently, where they're asking for our help, and we're sending out letters of cease and desist. We're also sending out, filing court cases, to try to set this misinformation wrong and get it corrected, because we have people coming to us from all across the country. In fact, we just got an inquiry from the state of Hawaii, and an individual that wants us to represent him out there.
So I guess I follow up on that. So I guess the question, it raises the question about the importance of this ruling, right? I mean, a lot of people on the right believe that this is a great ruling, and was going to fix a lot of the state's financial problems. But if the states can just dodge the ruling in the ways you described earlier, then is this ruling as important as it's been made out to be in the news?
Oh, yes, it's extremely important. But anytime you get a very, very good ruling, and any decision that comes out of the court, there is always going to be people that are going to fight it, period. Take a look at Brown versus Board of Education. They brought down that ruling, but it still was fought against for years, and they still didn't want to abide by that ruling. The same thing goes with the Janus decision. There are people out there and entities that are going to fight it as long as they possibly can in order to try to circumvent the ruling or massage it or whatever else you want to call it. And it's just indicative of what happens with any court decision that comes down.
All right. Want to give a big round of applause and thank you to our guest, Mark Janus.
Thank you very much.
So a couple of program notes as we close. Again, want to thank everybody for coming. If you're not already on our email list, we'd like to invite you to join. You can talk to Jeff, you can talk to me, you can talk to Kara here in the front, who just briefly raised her hand. She's right here. You can also go to americasfuture.org and you can sign up for our email list there, find out more information about our organization, what we're doing, what events we have coming up. We would really love you to be a part of these events going forward. If you have any feedback on this evening's event, event or any ideas for what you think would be interesting events, interesting topics, interesting speakers, please come talk to me. You will have time to do that. We have the room until 9 o'clock tonight. The bar will remain open until 9 o'clock tonight, being the important part about having the room until 9 o'clock tonight. I think we still have a little bit of food left, so please feel free to help yourself. I want to thank you again for coming, and have a good evening. Thank you.